Thomas Reed felt the vibration of the shuttle's landing thrusters long before the docking clamps locked into place. When the door slid open, a wave of cool, sterile air rolled in the unmistakable atmosphere of a galactic council station. Suspended in neutral territory between several star systems, the station shone like a floating cathedral of metal, light, and diversity. Humanity had fought for 3 long years just to earn a provisional invitation inside, and today Thomas walked its corridors as Earth's sole representative. His boots tapped a steady rhythm across the gleaming white floor as a trio of station attendants guided him through a twisting network of hallways. Every section changed subtly: temperature, gravity, humidity, tailored to accommodate species from hundreds of worlds. The place was impressive, but it also felt oddly impersonal, like one massive compromise designed to avoid offending anyone. Thomas carried a diplomat's calm on the outside, but inside he felt the weight of expectation. Billions of people back home were counting on him to prove that humans belonged among the stars. He reminded himself that he was here because he excelled at diffusing tension, reading emotions, and bridging cultural gaps. Those skills had opened doors before. Hopefully they would open this one too. His assigned living quarters were spacious, but strangely empty. Rounded furniture, adjustable surfaces, universal interfaces. Everything designed to be used by anyone, which meant it felt like it belonged to no one. He unpacked a few personal items, hoping to warm the place. A single-frame photo caught his eye. Himself kneeling next to a large German shepherd named Rex, both faces bright with joy. Thomas traced a thumb over the glass. Rex was still aboard the human ship, docked at a distant bay, waiting loyally as always. The night passed quickly. By morning, Thomas was dressed in his formal navy blue diplomatic suit and on his way toward the Grand Council chamber. The chamber was enormous, a circular arena topped by a transparent dome showing the star field in stunning clarity. The ring-shaped table encircled a central open zone, each section customized for various species. He recognized the Vexians immediately. Tall, slender bodies, elongated necks, shimmering skin patterns, elegant in a way that reminded him of a cross between Earth giraffes and humanoids. Their ambassador, Kareth, sat proudly among them, silver-blue markings glistening like polished stone. Next were the Kathari, smaller creatures covered in delicate fur with expressive ears and multiple nimble arms. They moved with quick, jittery motions as though powered by perpetual nervous energy. Several Kathari younglings observed from an upper gallery as part of a cultural exchange program. The Delaney delegates appeared to float rather than walk, tentacle bodies rippling beneath their flower-shaped heads. Each head's petals shifted through colors Thomas didn't yet recognize. Gesture, emotion, language all rolled into one. Thomas took the small seat assigned to humanity, the first and only seat. If this meeting went well, perhaps others would follow. Opening ceremonies began with a display of tradition from each species. Melodic Vexian greetings, rhythmic tapping from the Kathari, synchronized color flares from the Delaney. When Thomas stood to deliver Earth's greeting, his voice echoed slightly in the grand chamber, but the reception was polite, even warm. The morning discussions went smoothly. Protocols, trade frameworks, cultural exchange expectations, all laid out with surprising efficiency. By midday recess, Thomas allowed himself to exhale. Maybe humanity would fit here. But then everything shifted. During recess, after a diplomat Pillock approached him with wide, curious eyes. A young Vexian trailed behind her, along with Delaney, whose petals swirled with light lavender. Curiosity. Human Thomas. Pillock chirped through her translator. Your biographical profile notes that you travel with an emotional support companion. This phrase is unfamiliar. Could you explain? Thomas felt himself relax. A harmless question. Of course. Many humans benefit emotionally from animal companions. My partner, Rex, has been with me for 6 years. He helps manage stress during long missions. He's a dog, specifically a German shepherd. The reaction was immediate and alarming. Pillock's ears slammed flat. The Delaney's petals flushed from lavender to deep, warning red. The young Vexian recoiled so fast his long neck nearly folded. A canine. Pillock squeaked. You travel with a predator? Nearby conversations halted. Delegates turned. The entire recess hall fell silent. Kareth, who had been reviewing documents nearby, strode over with stiff, deliberate steps. His normally serene expression had mutated into pure shock. "Did I hear correctly?" he asked, voice booming through the chamber. "Human Thomas claims to keep a predator as a personal companion?" Thomas felt the moment slipping away, but stepped forward calmly. "Yes, Ambassador. Dogs are domesticated. They've lived with humans for thousands of years." Kareth's throat rumbled. Domesticated does not erase instincts. You share your living space with an apex hunter. A murmur swept through the chamber. Disbelief, fear, judgment. Thomas tried again. "Rex is gentle, loyal, safe, safe," Kareth repeated coldly. "You bond emotionally with a creature designed to kill?" Delegates exchanged anxious glances. Some whispered. Others outright stared at Thomas, as though he confessed to harboring a biological weapon. For the first time, humanity's application began to crack. Not under politics, but under a dog. Kareth's disapproving stare lingered on Thomas like a physical weight. His long neck angled downward, the vexing equivalent of a hostile glare. Around the chamber, delegates whispered nervously, their body languages tightening as though a silent alarm had been triggered. One of the Delaney representatives spoke first, petals flashing in rapid, sharp streaks of crimson. "You travel with a carnivore? A hunter capable of tracking, chasing, tearing? How can this be standard practice for your world?" Thomas took a controlled breath. He knew panic would only deepen their assumptions. "Dogs are not wild predators anymore," he said gently. "Humans domesticated wolves thousands of years ago. We shaped them into companions. Today they're guardians, helpers, emotional partners." "Helpers?" Pillock echoed, eyes wide, ears trembling. "Predators do not help. They hunt. That is what their teeth are for." Thomas tried to keep his reply soft. "They used to. Not anymore. They've evolved with us. Our species grew together, turning danger into trust." But the words were sinking like pebbles into an ocean of fear. A tall Delaney elder approached slowly. Every shift of his petals revealed emotional shifts Thomas could only partly read. Alarm, confusion, disapproval. "Human Thomas," he said with strained politeness, "our coalition thrives because all member species cherish nonviolence. Even our smallest companion animals are peaceful herbivores. You say your species brings carnivores into your domestic spaces willingly. This suggests unsettling instincts." The implication stung. The chamber grew more tense as Kareth raised a hand for silence. "Perhaps," he said gravely, "Earth's application to the coalition is premature. Predatory familiarity may indicate deeper psychological traits incompatible with our values." Thomas's heart sank. "With respect," he said, "you're making judgments about an entire species based on a single misunderstanding." "It is no misunderstanding," Kareth replied sharply. "It is a foundation of survival. Prey species do not choose predators as companions." "We are not prey," Thomas said. Gasps spread across the room, like a shock wave. Kareth leaned closer. "So you are predators?" Thomas hesitated, not because he was unsure, but because he knew every nuance of the next words mattered. "Humans are omnivores," he said slowly. "But instinct does not define morality. Cooperation, community, compassion, those define us too." The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The tension wasn't fading. If anything, it was rising. The afternoon session began like walking into a storm. No matter the topic, trade routes, cultural ethics, scientific contributions, everything circled back to that same theme. Can predators be trusted? A Delaney scientist questioned whether humans could conduct unbiased research while living alongside carnivores. A Qatari ambassador wondered aloud if humans might normalize danger or take reckless risks because they grew up around hunters. Even neutral comments carried subtle bites. Even friendly gestures felt cautious, hesitant. Thomas remained composed, but inside frustration coiled tight like a spring. He had known the coalition was made up entirely of herbivorous or non-predatory races, but he hadn't anticipated this level of instinctive aversion. He was not merely trying to negotiate terms anymore. He was fighting centuries of evolutionary fear. By evening, When he finally made it back to his quarters, all the politeness he'd held on to crumbled. He sank onto the edge of his bunk, exhausted. The photo of Rex caught his eye again. The dog's goofy, happy face a stark contrast to the hostility he'd faced. He activated a secure channel to the human vessel. A few seconds later, Rex's familiar muzzle filled the screen. The shepherd barked softly in recognition, ears perked, tail wagging as though Thomas had been gone for weeks instead of a day. "Hey, buddy," Thomas whispered, voice thick. "Rough day." Rex tilted his head and wagged harder. Thomas sighed. "They're terrified of you, boy. Of all dogs. Of all predators. They think we're unstable because we live with you. They think we're dangerous." He rubbed his forehead. "I don't know how to fix this." Rex pressed his nose toward the camera, as if trying to comfort him through the screen. A sad laugh escaped Thomas. "You're probably more civilized than half the people I've spoken to today." The next morning brought no mercy. Thomas entered the Grand Council chamber and immediately noticed a new agenda item added overnight. Cultural Standards Review. The words alone made his stomach sink. Ambassador Kareth opened the session solemnly. To better understand humanity's unusual behaviors, we have asked Scholar Velen to prepare an educational presentation. The lights dimmed. A massive hologram flared to life. Velen, an elderly Kathari with silver-streaked fur, stepped forward. His voice, filtered through a translator, was calm and professorial. "Honored delegates," he began. "Today we examine behavioral markers of civilized species within the Coalition. The early slides were harmless. Art, scientific development, architecture. But then the display shifted toward a section labeled Appropriate Interspecies Interaction. Velen gestured and new holograms appeared. Predators from a dozen worlds. Jaws, claws, fangs, hunting stances. The images were dramatic, almost theatrical. "We respect such creatures," Velen said. "We study them, but we maintain proper boundaries. No civilized being willfully welcomes a predator into their homes." Several delegates nodded emphatically. The next slides contrasted small, harmless creatures labeled ideal companions. Tiny herbivores, gentle aviary species, aquatic creatures with no offensive biology at all. Then Velen concluded with words that hit like a slap. "There is no rational justification for domesticating predators. Such behavior suggests impaired judgment or an inherent psychological flaw." Polite applause followed. Thomas raised his hand, but Kareth quickly shifted to the next item, pointedly ignoring him. By midday, the tone of the chamber had changed entirely. Every proposal Thomas presented was countered with subtle digs about predator bias, environment-induced aggression, or questionable human norms. Delegates whispered behind their screens, comparing notes about whether humans could ever fit into a society defined by prey instincts. On his way back to his quarters, 3 figures intercepted him. Kareth, Pillock, and a Vexian security officer named Thex. "Human Thomas," Kareth said stiffly, "we require your presence for further discussion." It wasn't a request. They ushered him into a small private room. Thex activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air. Creatures with bared fangs, bloodied muzzles, tear-ripping jaws. Wolves. Wild canids. Earth's ancient predators. "This," Kareth said icily, "is what you claim to share your life with." Thomas felt anger rising, but kept it contained. "Those are wild animals. Not dogs. Not Rex." Pillock shook her head, ears trembling. "Domesticated or not, instinct remains. Hunters remain hunters." Thex zoomed the hologram onto an ancient wolf freezing mid-kill. "You expect us to believe this became harmless?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "Not harmless. Trustworthy." Kareth's eyes narrowed. A distinction prey species cannot afford to gamble on. And for the first time, Thomas understood this was no diplomatic debate. This was raw, primal fear, and it was going to break humanity's chances completely unless something drastic changed. Thomas stood in the small conference room surrounded by the holographic images of predators. Snarling muzzles, dripping jaws, ancient hunts frozen in violent clarity. Thex, the Vexian security officer, operated a projector with mechanical precision, each slide reinforcing the chamber's rising panic. "This," Thex said, "is the natural ancestor of your so-called companion animal." A giant wolf filled the room, muscles tense, eyes locked on prey. Thomas kept his breathing steady. Rex is not a wolf. He is several thousand years and hundreds of generations removed from that animal. Humanity didn't simply tame predators. We evolved alongside them. Pillock wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. But how can you trust something built for killing? How can you sleep near it? Thomas softened his tone. "You're looking at fear instead of reality. Dogs don't see us as prey, they see us as family." Karatha's expression grew colder. "Emotional bias. You are too close to recognize danger." Thomas clenched his jaw. Rex has never harmed an innocent being. Never. But could he? Karatha pressed. Thomas paused, not because he doubted Rex, but because he knew anything he said could be twisted. And all three aliens were watching him with expectant, fearful suspicion. "That is enough," Karatha said, lifting a long hand. "We must be honest. Human Thomas, your people may be psychologically incompatible with the Coalition. You bond with predators. You normalize risk. You rely on dangerous creatures for emotional support. These behaviors are concerning." The blow landed harder than Thomas expected. He'd known the path would be difficult. He hadn't expected the door to be slammed in his face because of a dog. Karatha gave a final nod, the Vexian sign of dismissal. "Consider the implications carefully. Our coalition cannot risk instability." And with that, they left him alone among the frozen holograms of snarling predators. Back in his quarters, the silence felt heavier than gravity. Thomas sat at his table, staring blankly at the messaging terminal. Hours passed in a haze of frustration. Every report he drafted to Earth grew more hopeless, more resigned. Eventually, he turned on the video link. Rex appeared instantly on the screen, ears up, tail wagging, brown eyes shining with pure affection. He barked softly as though sensing his human's distress across the void of space. "Hey, buddy," Thomas murmured. Rex's happy panting filled the room. "They don't understand you," Thomas whispered. "They don't understand us. I keep talking, explaining, but it's all noise to them. They see your teeth, not your heart." Rex pressed his snout toward the screen. "You'd show them, wouldn't you?" Thomas said. "If they met you, really met you." Rex barked once, tail sweeping behind him. Thomas sighed deeply. Discussion wasn't enough. Proof was needed. Something undeniable. Something real. He ended the call and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I need a miracle," he whispered. He got something else entirely. The next morning, Thomas was yanked from sleep by sharp alarms and flashing crimson lights. The station's emergency sirens blared through every corridor. Instinct took over as he pulled on his uniform and strapped the translator to his wrist. His communicator buzzed with panic chatter. "Containment breach, Cargo Bay 7. Specimens loose, unknown quantity. Predatory movement detected in multiple corridors. Security teams falling back. Repeat, falling back." Thomas froze. Predators? Loose on a station full of herbivorous species who barely tolerated the idea of carnivores? This was a nightmare. He checked his door's external camera. The hallway looked empty but tense, like something dangerous had passed through. Most delegates would obey the shelter order. But then, a faint sound cut through the alarms. Crying, high-pitched, trembling, young. Thomas's stomach dropped. He stepped into the corridor without hesitation. The red emergency lights made every corner seem sharper, darker. Shadows flickered. Somewhere in the distance, metal scraped and claws chittered against panels. The crying grew louder. 3 small voices, sobbing in terror. He turned the corner and stopped cold. At the far end of the corridor, 3 Cathar younglings were huddled against a sealed door, their small bodies shaking violently. Their tufted ears lay flat, eyes wide and wet with fear. Between Thomas and the children, a pack of creatures. They resembled some grotesque fusion of reptile and mammal. 6-legged, sleek-scaled bodies with ridges of coarse fur along their spines and jaws full of needle-like teeth. They moved with coordinated, unnervingly silent steps. Predators. Pack hunters. The younglings shrieked when they spotted Thomas, reaching out toward him desperately. The pack hunters shifted focus, now torn between two prey options. Their tails rattled. Their nostrils flared. Thomas activated the comm. Thomas, read here. I've located 3 Kathari younglings in Corridor 47B. They're trapped. Predators are closing in. I need immediate security response. Static crackled. Then a Delaney officer responded sharply. Human Thomas, do not engage. Retreat to a shelter zone. Our teams are assembling. Do not approach the specimens. Thomas's eyes darted to the trembling children. They cannot retreat. If I leave, they'll be dead in minutes. The X's voice came next, tight and strained. Human, fall back. Our personnel are not trained for a close-range predator confrontation. That's the problem. Thomas snapped. They need help now. The pack leader, a larger specimen, hissed, muscles coiling. The kid screamed. Thomas did not think. He made a decision that would violate 6 rules. He opened a private channel to the human ship. This is Thomas Reed. Authorization Delta 77. Emergency override. Transport Rex to my coordinates immediately. The AI responded. Station protocol forbids. Override it. Thomas barked. Lives are at stake. Confirming override. Transport in 30 seconds. Caratha's horrified voice crackled through the comm. Human Thomas. What have you done? You cannot bring that predator here. Thomas stared straight at the younglings. Watch me. The pack tensed. The kids sobbed harder. Blue light shimmered in the corridor. Rex materialized between Thomas and the predators, landing in a perfectly balanced stance, ears forward, tail stiff, eyes locked on the threat. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply stood, solid and unshakable. And the pack froze. Their instincts recognized instantly what the delegates could not. A bigger predator had arrived. The corridor transformed the moment Rex materialized. 1 heartbeat before, the pack hunters were confident, closing in on small, trembling prey. 1 heartbeat after, every creature froze, muscles locking, nostrils flaring. Rex stood like a living wall, firm and alert. His fur bristled slightly, but his posture was controlled, neither aggressive nor fearful. The German shepherd shifted his stance, distributing his weight evenly, ready to spring in any direction. The pack hunters chittered in confusion. They understood instinctively what the coalition delegates had failed to grasp. Rex was not prey. He was a predator. A trained, disciplined, dominant one. Thomas stepped up beside him, placing a hand gently on Rex's shoulder. That single touch grounded him. Watch! Thomas commanded firmly. Rex's eyes never left the pack. His ears flicked once in acknowledgement. The comm channel lit up with horrified voices. Human Thomas, remove that animal immediately. You have violated 5 security directives. That creature is a lethal threat. Call it off before it attacks. Thomas ignored every panicked voice. A soft whimper drew his attention. The younglings were pressed against the sealed door, their small bodies trembling violently. Their fur was puffed up by fear. One covered her eyes with shaking paws. Thomas spoke gently over his shoulder. Stay very still. Help is here. Rex's tail wagged once, but his gaze stayed locked on threat. The pack tension snapped like a stretched wire. The largest hunter hissed loudly, snapping its jaws in challenge. Rex responded with a low growl, deep as rolling thunder. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was clear, ancient, universal. Back. Off. The alpha faltered. 2 smaller hunters skittered backward. Another tried a lunge, but stopped mid-step as Rex shifted forward and bared his teeth, not in fury, but in unmistakable authority. Thomas whispered, Good boy, hold. The comm channel had gone silent. Every security officer, diplomat, technician watching through cameras, collectively holding their breath. 1 Kathari youngling let out a small sob. The sound snapped the pack back into motion. They turned toward the children, body language sharpened with hunger and instinct. Rex reacted instantly. Guard, Thomas commanded. Rex moved with explosive speed. 3 bounding steps, placing himself between the younglings and the approaching hunters. He didn't attack. He projected raw presence, head low, shoulders squared. His bark thundered through the corridor. The effect was immediate. The entire pack recoiled as though struck. Hunters used to frighten prey had never encountered a defender who stood his ground, who didn't flee, didn't cower, didn't freeze. Rex took another step forward. The pack retreated another 2 steps back. Slowly, methodically, Rex pushed them away from the younglings. He's hurting them, Thomas murmured in astonishment. Rex had done similar work back on Earth, guiding livestock, protecting hikers, steering threats away from vulnerable targets. The training was second nature. Here, he was doing it with alien predators. Thomas opened the comm security teams. Focus on the intersection ahead. Rex will push them toward you. What? Thex barked. Human, your animal cannot control. Watch. Thomas cut him off. And they did. The next few minutes played out with a strange, hypnotic rhythm. The pack tried 3 coordinated rushes, testing Rex, circling him, seeking weaknesses. But the German shepherd anticipated each feint with uncanny awareness. He pivoted, blocked, barked, growled, nudged their formation, and reclaimed ground piece by piece. He was not fighting. He was managing them. Every movement was measured, efficient, deliberate. Every action pushed the pack where Thomas wanted them. Toward the intersection, toward containment. Security teams listened in stunned silence as Rex performed what an entire squad of herbivorous officers could not. The younglings watched in awe, fear slowly melting into fascination. The smallest one tugged Thomas's sleeve. Is he your pack, Alpha? Thomas smiled, despite everything. No, he's my partner. Rex drove the last cluster of hunters into the intersection. With precise timing, Thomas shouted into the comm. Now! Seal the corridor. Blue containment fields snapped into place with a vibrating hum. The pack hunters slammed against the shimmering walls, only to be pushed back by the energy barrier. Trapped. Security drones whirred overhead, releasing a calming vapor. One by one, the hunters slumped into unconscious heaps. Rex sat down, panting lightly. His tongue lolled out, eyes bright. Job done. Thomas knelt beside him, pulling the dog into a quick, grateful hug. You did incredible, boy. Absolutely incredible. Security guards arrived in a nervous swarm, each giving Rex a wide, respectful distance. Doctors rushed out from the newly unsealed door and checked the younglings. The smallest Kathari girl, silver-tipped fur trembling slightly, approached Rex again. She extended a shaky paw. Rex stayed perfectly still. His tail thumped gently. He saved us, she whispered. Her voice cracked with awe, not fear. A Delaney medic, still trembling, approached Thomas. Human, how did your predator know how to do that? Thomas looked at Rex. Because protecting others is what he was shaped for, Thomas said softly, and because he cares. The corridor felt different now. Not fear, not hatred, but quiet, shaken gratitude. The moment shattered everything the Coalition thought it knew about humans. But the true impact came later. Within hours, the rescue footage reached the Grand Council chamber. Delegates watched, first with horror, then disbelief, then awe. And when the last frame faded, the one where the silver-tipped youngling touched Rex's head, silence filled the chamber. Thomas and Rex were summoned immediately. As they entered, Kara stood at the center of the chamber, his tall frame trembling, skin markings pale. Thomas braced for accusations, reprimands, perhaps even arrest. But instead, Kara said quietly, voice thick with emotion, "You saved my daughter." The room gasped. The silver-tipped youngling from the video was Karatha's child. Thomas's heart stuttered. Everything was about to change. For a long moment, Thomas didn't move. The entire Grand Council chamber was silent. Thousands of eyes, lenses, pedals, or sensory nodes all fixed on him and the dog sitting calmly at his side. Karath, the towering Vexian ambassador, stood at the podium with his long neck bowed, a gesture Thomas had learned signaled vulnerability. Human Thomas Carrot began, voice trembling in a way Thomas had never heard. "You saved my daughter." The chamber stirred. Delegates whispered, some visibly shocked. Others looked at Carrot with a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. Thomas swallowed. "I didn't know she was yours. I just heard younglings crying." Carrot looked at Rex, the German shepherd sitting obediently, tail sweeping the floor in slow, curious arcs. "My Kella," Carrot continued, "is the silver-tipped youngling in the footage. She told me what your companion did. She told me he comforted her." Rex tilted his head at his name. Several delegates flinched instinctively. Even now, the sight of exposed canine teeth, even in a friendly grin, made their prey instinct spike. But Carrot did not flinch. Instead, he stepped closer. "May I—" he hesitated. Then quietly, "May I come nearer to your companion?" Thomas placed a hand on Rex's head. "Rex, easy. Friend." Rex's tail wagged, slow and steady. Carrot took a careful step. Then another. For the coalition's herbivorous species, approaching a predator voluntarily was a monumental act. It went against every fiber of their evolutionary wiring. Rex remained perfectly still, sensing the ambassador's fear and responding with gentle passivity. His ears lowered slightly, a canine gesture of peaceful intent. Carrot knelt, awkwardly, given his long legs, and slowly reached a hand toward the dog. Rex sniffed the air, then lightly pressed his nose into Carrot's palm. Gasps erupted throughout the chamber. A Delaney's petals flared bright blue in disbelief. A Kadari elder crushed his own ears flat in astonishment. Even Thex, the stern security officer, stared as though witnessing a miracle. Carrot's throat trembled. He trusts me." Thomas offered a soft smile. "He trusts your daughter." That was enough. Carrot drew a long, shaking breath and rose to his full height. His posture shifted, no longer rigid or hostile, but humbled. He turned to face the chamber. "For cycles uncounted," he said, voice ringing through the hall, "our coalition has believed that predators cannot be partners, that they cannot be anything but danger." His gaze swept across the delegates. Today, a human's companion proved us wrong. A soft, emotional murmuring rippled through the room. Kara continued, "When the containment breach occurred, our security officers, trained though they are, were overwhelmed by instinct. We froze. We hesitated. We could not move toward the danger." Shame flickered across many faces. Pillock, the Kadhari diplomat who had mocked Thomas days earlier, stood on trembling legs. Her ears drooped low. "My nephew was among the younglings. I tried to reach him. I couldn't. My body refused to move." Her voice cracked. Thomas stepped forward slightly. "You couldn't have helped that. Prey instincts are deeply rooted. It isn't weakness, it's biology." Pillock bowed her head. "You, however, and your companion walked straight toward danger." Thex, the Vexian security officer, spoke next, his voice firm but colored with shame. "We had weapons, containment drones, barriers, yet we still could not proceed." His sharp eyes turned to Rex. "Your companion acted as a trained soldier would, as a protector." Thomas nodded. "That's what dogs are. Not hunters, not monsters, partners." Kareth lifted a hand. The chamber quieted instantly. "For years," he said solemnly, "we have judged humanity through our own fears. We assumed your relationship with predators meant you were reckless or unstable." His long neck dipped. "We now see that it is something else entirely." A Delaney elder spoke, petals shifting gently. "Perhaps it is evolution of a different sort, one we have never experienced." Kara stepped aside, letting the full council see Thomas and Rex clearly. "This human," he said, "did not save Kell alone. His companion did what none of our security could. He defended younglings not of his species. He protected the helpless without being commanded. He acted with discipline, not savagery." Rex wagged his tail proudly at the praise, even if he understood only tone, not words. The chamber filled with soft murmurs of awe. Kareth raised his voice again. "I was wrong to mock you, human Thomas. We all were." He bowed deeply, an unprecedented gesture for a Vexian leader. "I offer you a formal apology." and gratitude that words can never fully convey. Several delegates stood, one by one. I second the apology. As do I. And I. The movement spread until nearly every delegation stood in collective, unified apology. Thomas blinked rapidly to keep emotion from overwhelming him. Rex leaned against his leg in gentle reassurance. Kareth looked around the chamber. I propose that Earth's membership application be reinstated immediately. A new wave of whispers surged through the chamber. Some delegates looked hesitant. Centuries of instinct were not erased in a single moment, but the undeniable truth hung in the air, shimmering like a new dawn. Humanity had shown what no other species had: courage, partnership, shared trust between predator and companion. A Delaney elder finally spoke. I vote yes. Then Pillock, yes. Then Thex, yes. Lights flashed across every delegation pod as votes were cast. When the tallies appeared in the air, the majority had voted in favor. Humanity's application would continue. Kareth turned back to Thomas. His voice softened. You came here seeking acceptance. Instead, you taught us something about ourselves. He glanced at Rex. About what we might become. For the first time since the negotiations began, Thomas felt true hope, but he had no idea that the Coalition's most extraordinary transformation was still ahead. The council chamber did not disperse immediately after the vote. Instead, an energized murmur rippled through the air like static as the delegates processed what they had witnessed. For generations, the Coalition's foundation had been shaped by one unspoken law. Prey had to band together to survive. Everything diplomacy, science, security had been built around that instinct. But in one night, a single Earth dog had cracked that ideology open. Thomas stood quietly with Rex at his side, giving the ambassadors and scholars time to absorb the shift. Rex remained composed, tail thumping lightly as he took in the vast, multi-species audience before him. It was as though he sensed the atmosphere was no longer hostile. Kareth returned to the podium. We have resumed negotiations, he said, but there are still matters to address. We must understand how humanity functions so differently from us. A Delaney scholar, petals swirling in thoughtful gradients, raised a tendril. I request the council be permitted to study the human-canine partnership in depth. This bond appears to be something unprecedented. A Vexian elder added, in our cultures, predators cannot be tamed nor reasoned with. Yet the human companion obeyed commands with perfect discipline. This suggests complex behavioral restructuring over many generations. Thomas stepped forward. I'll answer whatever questions you have. But understand something first. Dogs don't obey us out of fear. They do it because they want to. They choose loyalty. Murmurs swept through the delegates again, this time tinged with intrigue rather than skepticism. Pillock lifted a shaking paw. Human Thomas, may we see more examples of this partnership? I wish to understand. Her ears twitched nervously. My nephew said your companion spoke a language without words. Thomas smiled. He did. Dogs communicate through posture, sound, and instinct. They read emotions better than most humans can. Kareth nodded gravely. If the council agrees, we shall observe further behavior. His voice lowered. I want to know the creature who saved my child. Rex wagged his tail, giving Kareth an eager pant that made half the chamber flinch and the other half stare in fascination. The demonstration. The council arranged an observation hall, a semicircular arena usually reserved for scientific displays. Delegates filled the tiered seating, while Thomas and Rex stood in the center of the polished floor. Thomas knelt beside Rex, stroking his fur. All right, buddy, just do what you always do. Friendly. Calm. No surprises. Rex licked his hand, ready for anything. Kareth's voice echoed. Begin whenever you are prepared. Thomas stood and spoke clearly, so the translators could pick up every nuance. Rex, sit. Rex sat instantly. A wave of startled reactions swept across the seats. Rex down. The shepherd lowered himself gently onto his belly. Gasps. Color flashes. Tremors of disbelief. The Delaney elder whispered, he obeys willingly. Thomas continued, Rex, speak. One powerful bark shook the room. A few smaller delegates jumped in their seats. Rex tilted his head curiously at the startled reaction, which earned a ripple of quiet laughter from the cat-hairy younglings in the gallery. Rex, gentle. Rex's body relaxed, posture softening, ears lowering. Kareth leaned forward, stunned. He changes emotional states on command. Thomas nodded. He reacts to tone, posture, and my presence. Dogs synchronize with their humans. They understand us. A young Vexian ambassador spoke up. Can he read danger? Oh, yes, Thomas replied. Better than any human. He pointed toward Thex, who purposely changed his stance to a mock-aggressive posture. Rex rose instantly, not attacking, but placing himself between Thomas and Thex. His stance was confident, protective, and calm. Thex froze. I did nothing but lean forward. Thomas smiled, but your body language changed. Rex noticed. A hush fell. This wasn't a beast. This wasn't a weapon. This wasn't a threat. This was intelligence, cooperation, empathy. A Delaney petal blew in amazement. The human companion distinguishes nuance far beyond our expectation. Thomas nodded, and he does it for one reason. He cares. Rex pressed against Thomas's leg at the sound of affection. Even most fearful delegates couldn't deny the truth. They weren't seeing instinctive savagery. They were seeing a living example of interspecies harmony deeper than anything in coalition history. Youngling interest. As the demonstration ended, the observation doors opened, allowing the younglings who'd watched from above to come closer, under supervision. Kella, Kareth's daughter, approached first. She moved carefully but with determination, her silver-tipped fur shimmering. Rex lowered his body slightly, sensing her small size. Kella reached out a small paw. Rex gently pressed his nose into it. Kella made a soft trill of joy. Kareth placed a trembling hand on the railing, watching his daughter interact with a predator without fear. His eyes glistened in a way Thomas had never imagined possible from a Vexian. Other younglings soon followed, forming a small semicircle around Rex. The German shepherd happily soaked up their attention, licking their paws, nudging their hands, flopping onto his back for belly rubs. Laughter, pure innocent, echoed in the hall. Adults stared, stunned. A coalition elder whispered, Our young adapt faster than we do. Pillock added softly, They see a friend where we see danger. The council chamber had shifted more in one demonstration than in the last 2,000 cycles. The new understanding. Later that day, the council reconvened with a reverent hush. Kareth addressed them, voice steady and full of something approaching hope. We have lived for thousands of cycles believing that predators could never be allies. Today, we have witnessed a truth our ancestors could not imagine. He gestured toward Thomas and Rex. Humanity does not merely tame danger. They transform it. They form bonds with strength, trust with hunters, loyalty with survivors. Delegates nodded, many with softened gazes. Kareth's voice deepened. The coalition has been balanced on one side of the natural scale for too long. Prey species seeking safety in numbers. But perhaps it is time we learn courage from those who evolved differently. He looked at Rex, who wagged politely. Perhaps it is time we stop running from predators, from fear, from our instincts, and learn what it means to stand beside them. A quiet awe filled the room. Thomas felt something in his chest loosen. Hope finally taking root. But the coalition was not done with surprises. One Delaney diplomat rose slowly. Human, Thomas. Rex did more than save lives. He showed us a future. A partnership we never believed possible. She bowed her petals deeply. If humanity joins this coalition, you will change it. Thomas looked at Rex. Rex wagged again, completely unaware he had just rewritten an entire civilization's philosophy. And the coalition was only beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. The days that followed were unlike anything Thomas could have predicted. Negotiations, once tense and skeptical, shifted into sessions of genuine curiosity. Delegates no longer eyed him as an unpredictable representative of a strange predator-loving species. Instead, they approached him with questions, real questions, driven by a mix of fascination and humility. And every day Kella visited, She arrived with a group of younglings, delicate steps, bright eyes, and a constant stream of excited chatter. Rex had become something of a hero among them, and they gathered around him wherever he went. On the 5th day, Thomas stepped onto the observation balcony overlooking the cultural atrium. What he saw nearly made him laugh. Rex lay in the middle of the floor, belly exposed, tongue lolling happily. 7 alien younglings of various species surrounded him, rubbing his stomach, hugging his neck, or braiding small ribbons into his fur. The Coalition's most feared, apex predator, reduced to an overgrown cuddle toy. 2 Delaney diplomats whispered nearby, petals shifting in warm gradients. "I still do not understand how such a creature can be both fierce and gentle," one murmured. "That duality," the other replied thoughtfully, "might be why humans form alliances unlike any we've known." Thomas approached, and Rex leapt up to greet him joyfully, tail whipping back and forth. This sent several younglings stumbling in delight. "Easy, boy," Thomas laughed. Kella pressed a paw to her chest. "Honor Thomas," she said proudly. "Rex has learned 3 of our calming phrases." Thomas blinked. "What?" The Kathari girl lifted her chin. "Watch." She approached Rex and chirped a soft, melodic trill. Only 2 notes. Rex instantly sat, tail thumping. Kareth, watching from a distance, nearly collapsed from shock. Kella trilled again, a slightly lower tone. Rex booped her forehead with his nose. The 3rd phrase, a high fluttering sequence, made Rex roll onto his back with his paws in the air. Thomas groaned. "You taught my dog new commands." Kella puffed up in pride. "He is very smart." Rex barked happily, agreeing wholeheartedly. A new diplomatic tool. Back in the Grand Council chamber, the political climate had completely transformed. Where once Thomas had been grilled, doubted, even mocked, now he was treated like a pioneer. Delegates asked him to explain human psychology, social structures, conflict resolution, and, most popular of all, interactions with animals. Pillock approached him one afternoon, her ears drooping shyly. "Human Thomas," she began, "I must confess something." Thomas set down his tablet. "Go ahead. When I first learned you lived with a canine, I believed it was a sign of instability." She swallowed. "But after interacting with Rex, and after seeing how he protected the younglings, I realized I mistook bravery for recklessness." Her ears curled inward, a Kathari gesture of apology. Thomas smiled warmly. "It's all right. Fear is natural. Understanding is learned." She nodded gratefully. "I hope our species can learn much from yours." Thex, the Vexian security officer who once nearly accused Thomas of endangering the Coalition, approached next. His stance was stiff, but respectful. "Human Thomas," he said, "your companion demonstrated abilities our security teams have never encountered." He hesitated. "Would Earth be willing to share some of its predator handling techniques?" Thomas nodded. "When the treaty is finalized, I'll make sure our experts send training modules." Thex bowed his head deeply. "Thank you." It wasn't lost on Thomas that the Vexian guard, who once recoiled from the mention of a dog, was now asking for guidance in protective training. The Coalition was evolving before his eyes, a symbol of something larger. Later that evening, Thomas and Rex were invited to the Council Gardens, an artificial biome designed to soothe delegates of all species. Luminous plants glowed softly under the dome's simulated twilight. Kareth waited at the center, posture strikingly relaxed. "Thomas," he greeted. "Rex." Rex trotted forward, tail wagging, and Kareth knelt to stroke his head. "My daughter will not stop speaking about him," Kareth said with gentle amusement. "She claims he guards dreams." Thomas chuckled. "He tries." Kareth's tone shifted. "What Rex represents is more than heroism, more than instinct or training." He looked at the stars above. "He represents what we feared, yet desperately needed." Thomas frowned softly. "Courage." Kareth shook his head. "Unity." He paused. "Something the Coalition has struggled with for generations." He turned to face Thomas. "We built this alliance as prey seeking safety. Our bond is rooted in fear. Fear of predators, fear of conflict, fear of the unknown." His eyes lowered to Rex. But humans form bonds of the very thing we ran from. You created trust where instinct said none was possible. Thomas glanced down at Rex, who looked up at him as if waiting for praise. A long time ago, Thomas said quietly, wolves learned that teaming up with humans gave them better chances of survival. We learned the same. It wasn't a one-sided change. Kareth nodded. Rex shows us that cooperation can be chosen, not forced by instinct. He placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. And for the first time, our coalition is beginning to understand that. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, watching Rex sniff glowing plants and gently nudge a Delaney diplomat who had wandered too close. Kareth's voice softened. Thomas, you must know something. Thomas turned. When the vote first began for Earth's membership, I expected resistance. Kareth took a breath. But now, delegates approach me daily, asking when humanity can take a larger role. Thomas blinked. Already? Kareth's neck dipped in a nod. Rex shattered a fear we've carried for millennia. You shattered the assumptions built on those fears. He offered a small, genuine smile. You have united us more in 1 week than our ancestors did in 2,000 cycles. Thomas felt warmth bloom in his chest. And behind him, Rex barked proudly, as though claiming credit. Kareth laughed. He knows. Yes, Thomas said, ruffling the dog's fur. He always knows. The stars glimmered overhead, silent witnesses to a coalition on the brink of transformation. And Thomas knew the final negotiation would decide everything. The final day of negotiations arrived with a sense of gravity Thomas could feel in the floor beneath his boots. Weeks ago, he had walked into the Grand Council chamber unsure if humanity would survive its first impression. Now, he entered as someone who had inadvertently reshaped the coalition's philosophy. And yet, everything hinged on this last session. Rex padded beside him with quiet confidence, unaware of the political storm swirling around them. Delegates parted instinctively as Thomas walked down the corridor, not out of fear anymore, but out of respect. The chamber doors opened with a resonant hum. Inside, every delegation was present. The central dais glowed, signaling a formal vote would occur. Holographic screens hovered above each faction, displaying the treaty drafts Thomas had worked on day and night. Kareth stood at the front. When he saw Thomas enter, he offered a slight bow, an honor rarely given outsiders. Welcome, human Thomas, Kareth said, and welcome, Rex, protector of the young. Rex sneezed joyfully, which caused a wave of laughter across the chamber, the warm, relieved kind that only exists after fear is dissolved. Thomas reached the center podium. The lights dimmed as Kareth raised his voice. We gathered today for a historic decision. Earth seeks associate membership in our coalition, a pathway to full alliance. After recent events, we must decide not merely on policy, but on trust. He paused and gestured toward Thomas. And humanity has shown us a trust we did not know we lacked. Whispers of agreement spread through the room. Kareth continued. Before we proceed with the vote, human Thomas has requested a final opportunity to speak. The council grants this. Thomas exhaled slowly and stepped forward. Thomas's final speech. Honored delegates, he began, scanning the chamber. I stand before you not as a conqueror, not as a superior species, and certainly not as a predator. I stand here as someone who believes deeply in partnership. Rex sat at his feet, ears perked, listening as if he understood every word. When I first arrived, Thomas continued, you feared me. You feared the creature I travel with. You feared what our bond represented. Several delegates lowered their heads, acknowledging their past judgments. And I understand why. Thomas's voice softened. Your ancestors survived by running from the teeth and claws of predators. You built a civilization around caution, around safety, around unity born from necessity. He gestured toward Rex. But on Earth, unity came from something else. We didn't just survive predators. We befriended them. We made allies out of what once hunted us. We learned that trust can be built across the deepest biological divides. Rex glanced up, nudging Thomas's leg in silent support. That is the core of humanity. Thomas said firmly, not warfare, not aggression, but the ability to create connection where none should exist. Delegates shifted, leaning closer, listening. When I brought Rex to the station, he did not know your cultures. He did not know your species. Yet he risked everything to protect your children. He did not see prey or predator. He saw innocence and danger. Karatha's eyes shimmered faintly. That is the essence of our partnership. And if humanity joins this coalition, we offer that mindset, that heart to all of you. Silence, not the uneasy silence of fear, the reverent silence of revelation. Thomas stepped back. Thank you. The vote. Karath rose once more. Delegates, cast your votes. Lights pulsed across the chamber. Green for approval. Blue for conditional approval. Red for rejection. Thomas held his breath. Rex wagged his tail, unconcerned. The holographic tally began to assemble. One by one, symbols flickered into existence. Vexian delegation, green. Kathari delegation, green. Delaney delegation, green. Threllan delegation, green. Akari delegation, green. Luminari delegation, blue, conditional. Cultural exchange program required. More symbols cascaded down until the final total appeared. Heavy check mark, Earth approved for coalition membership. 86% majority. A burst of color rippled through the chamber. Species-specific cheers, chimes, trills, and luminescent displays lighting up the arena. Thomas felt his breath leave him in one shaky exhale. Rex barked triumphantly, startling several delegates and delighting many more. Karath approached, lowering his massive frame to meet Rex at eye level. Human Thomas, he said quietly, one more tradition remains. Thomas frowned. Tradition? Karath nodded. When a delegate performs extraordinary service that alters the course of the coalition, they may be awarded honorary citizenship and a ceremonial title. Thomas blinked. I didn't do anything alone. Rex. Karath raised a hand. Yes, him especially. Karath turned to the chamber and spoke clearly, voice echoing with ceremonial authority. Let it be known that human Thomas Reed and his companion Rex demonstrated valor, compassion, and unity beyond all precedent. In recognition of their actions in saving our young and revealing a new path forward, they shall be granted the title of... He paused, looking at Rex with real affection. Guardians of the Coalition. The chamber erupted again, waves of light and color reflecting off the dome like a sunrise. Thomas felt emotion swell in his chest. Rex barked once, proudly, as if accepting the title with full dignity. A new beginning. As the session adjourned, delegates poured into the arena to meet Rex and Thomas personally. A Delaney diplomat bowed. A Kathari elder pressed a warm paw to Rex's head. A young Vexian shyly handed Thomas a blossom-like token of gratitude. Karath approached last, with Kella at his side. The youngling hugged Rex tightly around the neck. Rex licked her cheek, causing her to squeal in delighted surprise. Karatha's long neck curved in a smile. Thomas Reed, I hope you understand that from this day forward, Earth is not merely an applicant. Thomas tilted his head. Then what are we? Karath answered softly. Family. Thomas looked at Rex, who gazed up at him with a happy pant. And for once, Thomas truly believed it. The celebrations continued long into the artificial night cycle. Delegates from every corner of the coalition gathered in communal spaces, lounges, gardens, cultural halls, to share food, stories, and their first tentative steps into a post-fear future. Rex, predictably, stole the show. The Delaney diplomats braided glowing petals into his fur. The Kathari younglings used him as a pillow. A cluster of luminari, bioluminescent beings made of shimmering particles, hovered around him like floating lanterns, fascinated by the warmth he radiated. Thomas watched with a mixture of amusement and awe. A week ago, most of these species wouldn't even be in the same room as a predator without panic alarms ready. Now Rex couldn't walk 10 meters without being stopped by admirers. He sat on a balcony overlooking the celebration, while Rex sprawled happily across 3 ambassadors' laps. Karath approached quietly. You seem overwhelmed, human Thomas. Thomas laughed breathlessly. Overwhelmed is accurate. Karath leaned against the railing, gazing over the gardens. You have changed us. I do not say that lightly. Thomas waved a dismissive hand. Rex changed you. I just brought him along. Kareth nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps, but you were the bridge. Without you, none of this would have been possible. They stood together in a rare moment of calm. A coalition transformed. The next morning, the council hall buzzed with activity. Not the old frantic anxiety, but a renewed sense of purpose. New committees were forming. Predator-Herbivore Coexistence Studies Group, Earth Culture Exchange Board, Interplanetary Companion Training Initiative, Youngling Emotional Development Working Group, with Rex as an honorary member. Thomas shook hands and exchanged greetings as he and Rex walked through the central hub. Delegates no longer kept distance. Instead, they reached out to touch Rex's fur lightly, as though he were a symbol of something bigger. Proof that fear didn't have to dictate their future. A Threllan ambassador stopped them. Human Thomas, might we request Earth assistance in developing partnerships with benign fauna on our worlds? Another asked, would humanity consider sharing early domestication histories? We believe it might help us better understand companionship. A third leaned forward. Could Rex lead a workshop? Thomas barked a laugh. He can try. Rex wagged his tail as if accepting the job. Word spread quickly that the newly titled guardians of the coalition were leaving the station soon to return home for Earth's own legislative approval. But the coalition elders insisted on a farewell event, and not a small one, the farewell ceremony. On the final day, the atrium transformed into a grand amphitheater. Thousands gathered, delegates, civilians, younglings, even maintenance workers. Light panels shifted to soft golden hues, representing a sunrise, symbolizing a new start. Kareth took the stage, his tall form silhouetted against the glowing dome. Today, he declared, we honor two beings who reshaped our understanding of unity. May their future journeys remind us that fear is not the only force that shapes civilizations. He gestured toward Thomas and Rex, standing at center stage. Thomas felt the weight of the moment. Rex sat at perfect attention, chest puffed, ears tall, tail still. A perfect soldier. A perfect friend. Kareth lifted a crystalline plaque. Human Thomas Reed, delegated envoy of Earth. Your courage, patience, and relentless pursuit of understanding have forever changed us. He handed the plaque to Thomas. Then he turned to Rex. And Rex, protector of younglings, companion of humanity, bridge between predator and prey. Kareth held out a smaller but equally ornate medallion attached to a soft woven strap. For your compassion and bravery, we bestow upon you the honorary medallion of unity. Rex sniffed it first, important step, then allowed Kareth to place it around his neck. The crowd erupted in applause, trills, color flares, and shimmering lights. Rex barked once, loudly, proudly. It echoed beautifully in the vast dome. Returning home. Later, Thomas walked down the departure corridor toward the shuttle that would take him and Rex back to Earth. Several species followed respectfully behind them, forming an informal escort. At the airlock, Keller rushed forward and hugged Rex's neck. Please come back soon. I will miss my dream guardian. Rex licked her cheek in farewell. Kareth approached, placing a hand on Thomas's shoulder. The coalition is changing, Thomas, and Earth will be part of that change. Thomas nodded. We'll be ready. Karetha's tone softened. You are leaving us with more than knowledge. You are leaving us with hope. Thomas swallowed the sudden emotion that rose in his throat. Rex pressed gently against his leg, grounding him. With a final wave, Thomas and Rex stepped into the shuttle. The doors closed, and the journey home began. A message to humanity. When the shuttle neared Earth, Thomas prepared a report for the World Council. Rex curled beside him, medallion gleaming softly in the cabin lights. Thomas recorded himself speaking. To the leaders of Earth, the coalition is not what we believed. They're not fragile. They're not timid. They're not incapable. They are simply unfamiliar with what we take for granted, trust born from difference, cooperation built across species, strength tempered with empathy. He glanced down at Rex, who gazed back with quiet intelligence. They thought predators only destroy, but we showed them predators can protect. We showed them the power of partnership. He ended with a simple line. Earth is ready to join a greater galaxy, but so is the galaxy ready for us. And on the station, long after the shuttle left, younglings continued to tell stories of the brave Earth Dog. The Delaney painted murals of Rex with glowing petals. The Cadhari designed plush replicas of him. The Luminari created light sculptures in his honor. And in the gardens, Kareth often sat with his daughter, watching the memorial plaque dedicated to the first interspecies guardian. It read, "Rex, the courage bringer, who taught us not to run." The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would humanity,